The smell never leaves you. Blood, gangrene, disinfectant, vomit, burned flesh. All of it mixed together in a cocktail that settles into your clothes, your hair, your skin. I showered every day for a year after I got home, and I could still smell it. Still can sometimes when I close my eyes. I'm Dr. William Brennan, Captain, Medical Corps, 67th Evacuation Hospital. But I wasn't always a captain. Wasn't always a doctor, really. Not the kind that mattered. I was 26 years old when I got drafted in 1943, fresh out of medical school at Johns Hopkins. 2 years of residency, barely enough experience to set a broken arm without supervision, and suddenly the Army's pinning bars on my shoulders and shipping me to Europe. And they needed doctors, needed them desperately. So they took what they could get. I landed in France in August 1944, 2 months after D-Day. The 67th was a mobile evacuation hospital. We set up close to the front lines, patched up the wounded enough to survive transport to the rear, then moved when the front moved. Tents and generators and operating tables that we assembled and took apart every few weeks. Before the war, I thought I'd be a pediatrician. Wanted to help kids fix their broken bones, cure their fevers, send them home to their mothers. Had this image of myself in a clean office with paintings on the walls and a nurse who kept my appointments organized. The war had other plans. By December 1944, I'd been in France and Belgium for 4 months. I'd done more surgery in those 4 months than most doctors do in 10 years. Amputations, mostly. Shrapnel wounds, burns, gunshots. You get good at it, whether you want to or not. Your hands learn to move fast. Your mind learns to shut off the part that feels sorry for the 20-year-old kid screaming while you take his leg. But nothing prepared me for what came after the Germans attacked through the Ardennes. December 16th, 1944. The beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. The day I learned what hell actually looks like. We were set up near Bastogne when the attack started. Had been there for 2 weeks, relatively quiet sector. The 101st Airborne was holding the area. Good troops, experienced. We were treating the usual stuff, frostbite, trench foot, the occasional accident. Winter in Belgium is brutal, but at least nobody was shooting at us much. Then dawn broke on December 16th, and the world exploded. The Germans hit with everything they had. 25 divisions, thousands of tanks, artillery that didn't stop for days. This wasn't the retreating, defeated Wehrmacht we'd been chasing across France. This was a full-scale offensive, and we were right in its path. The wounded started arriving within hours. At first, it was manageable. 12 men, then 24. Typical combat injuries. We handled it. But then the trickle became a flood. By evening, we had over 100 wounded, and they kept coming. The aid stations closer to the front were being overrun. Medics were bringing casualties straight to us, sometimes through German lines. "How many operating tables do we have?" I asked Major Steinberg, our chief surgeon. 4. "We need 8. We need 16. How many wounded are out there?" "More than we can count, Captain. Just keep working." So we worked. I performed my first surgery at 1900 hours. A private from Indiana with shrapnel in his abdomen. Took me 40 minutes to find all the fragments and patch his intestines. He might live, might not. I didn't have time to make sure. Next patient was already on the table before I'd finished scrubbing the blood off. Sergeant from New York. Both legs shattered by a mine. Had to amputate. Both of them, above the knee. He was 23 years old. Kept asking me if he'd still be able to dance with his girl when he got home. I lied. Told him yes. Told him he'd be fine. What else was I supposed to say? The third patient died while I was working on him. Chest wound, punctured lung. He stopped breathing, and we couldn't get him back. I called for the orderlies to remove the body. "Sir, we don't have room in the morgue," one of them said. "Then put him outside. We need this table." They dragged him off. Next patient was already waiting. By midnight, I'd done 8 surgeries. My hands were cramping. My eyes burned from exhaustion. The surgical tent was a slaughterhouse. Blood on the floors, on the walls, soaking through the sheets. We ran out of plasma, ran out of morphine, ran out of everything that mattered. But the wounded kept coming. And we kept working, because what else could we do? December 17th, day 2. I don't remember sleeping. Don't think I did. One surgery blurred into the next. The faces changed, but the wounds were all the same. Torn flesh, shattered bone, bodies broken by metal and fire. We lost the first man on my table around 0400 hours. A kid from Tennessee, maybe 19. Shell fragment had opened his femoral artery. I tried to clamp it, tried to repair it, but he'd lost too much blood before he got to us. His heart just stopped. I stared at him for maybe 5 seconds. Then I called for orderlies and moved to the next table. No time to grieve, no time to think, just work. Lieutenant Sarah Doherty, one of our nurses, she grabbed my arm around dawn. Her uniform was soaked with blood. Her face was pale, eyes hollow. "Dr. Brennan, we need you in the post-op tent, now." I followed her. The post-op tent was where we put the wounded after surgery, the ones stable enough to survive transport to the rear. Except we couldn't transport anyone. The roads were cut off. The Germans had surrounded Bastogne. We were trapped. The tent was packed. 50 men, maybe more, lying on cots, on stretchers, on the frozen ground, groaning, crying, calling for medics. The nurses were doing what they could, but there were only 6 of them for 50 wounded men. "This one," Doherty said, pointing to a soldier in the corner. I recognized him. The sergeant from New York, the double amputee. The stumps where his legs had been were bleeding through the bandages. The sutures had torn. He'd thrashed around in his sleep. The morphine had worn off, and we didn't have more to give him. I knelt down and checked the wounds. Both stumps were infected, already. Less than 12 hours after surgery, and gangrene was setting in. I could smell it. "We need to take him back to surgery, clean the wounds, re-amputate higher if necessary." "Sir," Doherty's voice was quiet, firm. "We have 47 men waiting for surgery right now. Some of them won't survive another hour. This man is stable, sort of." She was right. I knew she was right. Triage. Save the ones you can save. Let the others wait. Let them suffer. Let them die if you have to. But this was a man whose legs I'd taken. A man I'd promised would dance again. "Give him sulfur powder. Change his dressings every hour. Keep the wounds clean. If the infection spreads, come get me." "Yes, sir." I stood up, looked around the tent. All these men, broken and bleeding and dying. All of them needing help we couldn't give. I walked back to the surgical tent. The next patient was a corporal from Michigan. He'd been hit by a flamethrower. 3rd-degree burns over 60% of his body. I could see bone in places. He was conscious, crying, begging me to help him. I didn't know how to help him. Didn't have the equipment, the supplies, the expertise. Burns that severe needed weeks of specialized care. We had a tent, 4 tables, and almost no supplies. I did what I could, debrided the worst of it, covered the wounds, gave him what little morphine we had left. He died 3 hours later. Infection, probably. Or shock. Or just because his body gave up. I signed the death certificate and moved to the next patient. The days blurred together. December 18th, 19th, 20th. I lost track of time, lost track of how many surgeries I'd done, lost track of everything except the work. We were surrounded, completely cut off, no supplies getting through, no reinforcements, no way to evacuate the wounded. The Germans were shelling us intermittently, Nothing concentrated, just enough to remind us they were out there. One shell hit the supply tent and destroyed what little plasma we had left. We started rationing morphine. 1 ampule per patient, no matter how bad the pain. Some men needed more, a lot more, but we didn't have it to give. I watched a private from Ohio bite through his own tongue because the pain was so bad and we had nothing to give him. The nurses held him down while I reset his shattered arm, and he screamed until he passed out. I'd never heard sounds like that before the war. Didn't know human beings could make sounds like that. The cold was brutal. Below freezing, and we couldn't heat the tents properly. The generators were running low on fuel. We needed the power for the surgical lights, so the heating was secondary. Men were dying from hypothermia after surviving their wounds. We lost the sergeant from New York on December 19th. The gangrene spread faster than we could treat it. He developed sepsis, fever, delirium. He called for his mother at the end. They all called for their mothers. I held his hand while he died. It was the least I could do, the only thing I could do. Doherty cried after we moved him to the morgue tent. First time I'd seen her cry. She'd been working 36 hours straight, running between post-op and surgery, doing the work of 3 nurses. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry, I just..." "Don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for being human." She nodded, took a breath, went back to work. We all went back to work. Because the wounded kept coming. Not as many as the first day. The fighting had stabilized somewhat. But enough. Always enough. Major Steinberg collapsed on December 20th. Just fell over in the middle of a surgery. Exhaustion. We carried him to a cot, let him sleep for 4 hours. Then he was back at it. I asked him why he came back. Why he didn't rest longer. "Same reason you're here, Captain. Because they need us. Because if we stop, they die." He was right. We couldn't stop. Couldn't rest. The wounded needed us. So we kept working, kept cutting, kept sewing, kept trying to put back together what the war had torn apart. But some things can't be put back together. Some breaks are permanent. I was starting to understand that. Not just about the wounded, about us too. December 22nd, 1944. That's when I broke. Not physically, I kept working. But something inside me snapped, and I've never been able to fix it. We got word that morning that Patton's Third Army was pushing toward us. Relief was coming. Maybe 2 days, maybe 3. Just hold on. But 2 days might as well have been 2 years. I was in surgery when they brought him in. PFC Michael Chen, 20 years old from San Francisco, medic with the 101st. He'd been hit while trying to evacuate wounded from a destroyed aid station. Both arms were mangled. Shrapnel had shredded them from shoulder to wrist. I could see bone, tendons, muscle. Everything that's supposed to be inside was outside. His right hand was barely attached. He was conscious. In shock, but conscious. He looked at me with clear brown eyes and said, "Doc, you gotta save my hands. I'm a pianist. I need my hands." I looked at those arms and knew there was no saving them. The damage was too severe. Infection was already setting in. If I didn't amputate, he'd develop sepsis and die. But he was a medic. He'd been out there saving other men's lives when he got hit. And he was a pianist. Had a future. Had dreams. I tried. God, I tried. Spent 2 hours in surgery, doing everything I could think of. Cleaned the wounds. Repaired what vessels I could find. Sutured. Prayed. It wasn't enough. By that evening, both arms were black with gangrene. The infection was spreading into his shoulders. I had no choice. I amputated both arms, right at the shoulder. Took everything. When Chen woke up and realized what I'd done, he didn't scream, didn't cry. He just looked at where his arms had been, then looked at me. "You promised," he said. You promised you'd try to save them. I did try. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was a pianist. Was. Past tense. Because without hands, without arms, he wasn't a pianist anymore. Wasn't the person he'd been. I'd saved his life and destroyed it at the same time. He turned his face away from me. Didn't say another word. I walked out of that tent and kept walking, past the post-op tent, past the morgue, past the perimeter guards. Just walked into the frozen forest in my blood-soaked surgical gown and stood there in the snow. I couldn't feel the cold, couldn't feel anything. Just stood there staring at my hands. These hands that had taken Chen's arms, that had taken the sergeant's legs, that had failed to save the kid from Tennessee, the corporal from Michigan, dozens of others. These hands that were supposed to heal, that I'd spent years training to help people. And all they'd done in this war was cut and amputate and mutilate. Doherty found me there 20 minutes later. She didn't say anything, just stood next to me in the snow. I can't do this anymore, I said. Yes, you can. You have to. Why? Why do I have to? Because they're still out there. Still wounded. Still dying. And we're all they have. She took my arm and led me back to the hospital, back to the surgical tent. There were 3 men waiting for me, so I scrubbed in and went back to work. Because that's what you do. You break and you keep working anyway. Patton's Third Army broke through to Bastogne on December 26th, 4 days after I amputated Chen's arms. The siege was lifted. We could finally evacuate the wounded. By then, we'd treated over 400 casualties, performed more than 200 surgeries, lost 63 men despite everything we did. 63 soldiers who died in our hospital because we didn't have the supplies, the equipment, the time to save them. The war in Europe ended 5 months later. I was still with the 67th, still operating, still trying to put broken men back together. We pushed into Germany, crossed the Rhine, saw the concentration camps, treated American soldiers and German soldiers and liberated prisoners who were more dead than alive. I came home in October 1945. Got off the boat in New York, took a train to Baltimore, walked into my parents' house like nothing had happened. My mother cried when she saw me, said I looked thin, said I looked tired. She had no idea. I tried to go back to medicine, tried to finish my residency, become the pediatrician I'd wanted to be. But I couldn't do it. Couldn't look at children without seeing Chen's face. Couldn't set a broken arm without my hands starting to shake, remembering all the arms I'd taken off. The smell was everywhere. Every hospital smelled like that tent in Bastogne, blood and disinfectant and death. I'd walk into a room and have to leave immediately, gasping for air that didn't smell like war. I had my first panic attack in 1946, in the middle of a lecture at Johns Hopkins. Just froze up, couldn't breathe, thought I was dying. They took me to the emergency room. The ER doctor, kind older man, he looked at me and knew. Didn't need to ask where I'd served, just knew. Combat fatigue, he said quietly. Lots of boys coming back with it. You're not alone. But I was alone in every way that mattered. I quit medicine in 1947. Couldn't do it anymore. The school tried to talk me out of it. Said I was a gifted surgeon. Said the Army had trained me well. Said I could help people. I'd helped enough people, helped them right into graves. I found work as an accountant. Numbers don't bleed. Numbers don't scream. Numbers don't look at you with dying eyes and ask why you couldn't save them. I married in 1950. Nice woman, Mary. She was patient with me. Patient with the nightmares, the panic attacks, the nights when I'd wake up convinced I could smell gangrene. We had 2 kids. I was a decent father, I think, tried to be anyway. But I never told them about the war. Never told them what I'd done. How could I explain that their father had cut off men's arms and legs, that he'd watched men die on his operating table because he wasn't good enough, wasn't fast enough, didn't have the right supplies? How could I explain that I'd promised a young pianist I'd save his hands, then taken both his arms? I looked Chen up once in the 1960s. Found out he'd killed himself in 1952. Carbon monoxide in his garage. Left a wife and a baby daughter. I wonder sometimes if he thought about me before he did it. If he blamed me, he should have. I blame me. I'm 71 years old now, retired. Spend my days reading, working in the garden, trying to keep busy. Mary died 3 years ago. Cancer. I held her hand at the end, and even that brought me back to Bastogne, to all those hands I'd held while men died. The Battle of the Bulge lasted until late January 1945. Worst battle of the war for American forces. 19,000 killed, 70,000 wounded. I helped save some of them, cut pieces off others to save what was left, failed to save the rest. They gave me a Bronze Star for meritorious service in a combat zone. It's in a drawer somewhere. Haven't looked at it in years. People thank me sometimes when they find out I was a doctor in the war. Thank me for my service, for saving lives. I don't know how to tell them I didn't save lives. I just delayed deaths. Sometimes. When I was lucky. The men I operated on in Bastogne, the ones who survived, they went home missing parts of themselves. Arms, legs, futures, dreams. I took those things from them to keep them breathing. Was that saving them? Or was it just a different kind of killing? I don't know. Don't think I'll ever know. What I do know is this. I went to war as a doctor, someone who'd taken an oath to do no harm. I came back as something else, someone who'd done nothing but harm, even when I was trying to help. The wounded kept coming, and I kept cutting, and none of it mattered in the end because the war destroyed everyone it touched. The ones who died, and the ones who lived. The ones who lost limbs, and the ones who only lost their minds. We were all casualties, every single one of us. I'm still in that tent in Bastogne, still smelling the blood and the gangrene, still hearing the screams, still seeing Chen's eyes when he realized I'd taken his arms, still making promises I can't keep to men who won't survive. The war ended 30 years ago. But for me, it's December 22nd, 1944. Forever. I'm still in surgery, still trying to save men I can't save, still breaking, over and over again. The doctors were supposed to heal the wounded and send them home. But nobody healed us. Nobody sent us home. We're still there, still working, still failing, still covered in blood that won't wash off,